In this video, I visit the Sim Racing Expo 2025 in Dortmund, Germany, and I tell you what I liked and what I didn't like about this expo, and all from a shorter-haired, older gamer's perspective. What I didn't like about the expo. You've probably seen a dozen or more tour videos of the Sim Racing Expo in Dortmund for 2025 all over YouTube, and probably don't want or need to see any more of them. So here I am just going to look at my own personal positive and negative experiences of the show. Let's get the negatives out of the way first. What I didn't like about this year's Sim Racing Expo, and honestly this is the thing I hated the most, was the endless queuing for everything. Sure, expos are known for queues, that's fair enough, and arguably part of the experience, but this year the queuing was on an altogether different level. The queuing itself actually started before you even got inside the expo, with this massive line stretching all the way back towards the metro station, a line that went down a steep concrete staircase. Health and safety aficionados look away now. And it didn't stop there, as once you finally made it through the gates, more queues awaited you. Queue after queue after queue. The endless queuing was probably a direct result of the sheer lack of rigs that were available to the general public. Much less, in my opinion, than previous years that have been at the expo. From my admittedly older gamer's memory, 2024 offered far more setups to actually use for the general public, not just the YouTubers of greater subscriber numbers, but for everybody. And it felt like a greater effort had also been made in previous years to manage the crowds properly. There were, in 2024, roped off areas, QR scans to speed up the registration process that you need to do to actually sit in a rig, and a lot more marshals standing around to make sure all of this actually happened in a swift and efficient manner. Put simply, previous years, this all worked fine. This year, not so much. The roped off areas and QR codes that could speed everything up were mostly replaced with just clumps of people standing around, hoping the person running the rig would realize they were next in the queue. It felt messy, unorganized, and honestly, a bit of a free-for-all. Giant Software were probably the worst offenders for not making the best use of the space they had booked for themselves. Their area was literally big enough to park a tractor in. Here it is. But the rest of the space was almost empty, with only a total of 6 rigs available for use in a space that could have arguably coped with 3 times that number. The result, a ridiculously long queue for anyone wanting to try Project Motor Racing, which of course was pretty much everybody at the expo. I tried to queue here, I really did, but I only lasted about an hour before I finally gave up and wandered off for a much needed warming drink. That hall was really cold this year. But Giant Software weren't alone in what appeared to be companies not really thinking things through. Moza had a presence, sort of, tucked away on the GT Omega stand, but there didn't seem to be anyone from Moza to talk to, and new products from Moza were just not there, which is strange for an expo. Thrustmaster also put in minimal effort, showing up with a wheel they released last year. But at least they showed up, which is more than could be said for Logitech, who didn't bother at all. But the real letdown for me, and anyone else into VR, was just how little VR there was actually at the show. There were a couple of small setups here and there, a Quest 3 and a farming sim. Yes, really. Some Quest 3s in what looked like some kind of medieval torture device, and just two Pimax headsets, but no Pimax staff to back them up or talk to about them. Overall, VR at this expo was almost invisible, with none of the major players making any real effort to show off the full potential of VR in sim racing. Now, I get why Meta didn't bother. They've basically abandoned PC VR at this point, but for others like Megan X, Big Screen Beyond, and especially Pimax, it felt like a huge missed opportunity. The 2 Pimax headsets that I did spot at the show were behind queues so long I couldn't even get close enough to tell you which models they were. I have seen in Flight Sim Expo videos Pimax making a big splash. I imagine you've also seen these videos. So seeing Pimax so underrepresented here at a Sim Racing Expo was honestly very disappointing and a little bit bewildering. What I did like. All right, let's move on to the Sunshine and Rainbows section of this video and what I did like about this year's Sim Racing Expo. And that is really those companies that did get it right and did so with a certain amount of style. Case King are a great example of this. They are a German PC retailer with a strong foothold in sim racing and had probably the best demo area in the entire hall. No motion rigs, but a large number of solid setups that were all running Project Motor Racing. And this turned out to be one of the few places where I could actually get some hands-on time with that sim. There was a private booth somewhere run by giants, but that was inaccessible to me. Here you can see me doing a few laps in an R8 using Project Motor Racing. It was a hot lap session, so it's hard to get a proper sense of the racing dynamics, and of course AI cars were missing. But this short session did quietly impress me. The force feedback felt solid, responsive and believable. Believable enough to make me genuinely optimistic for Project Motor Racing's release next month. There was a bit of bad news. At the show, they confirmed that Project Motor Racing will not include VR or triple screen support at launch. VR, I can sort of understand. It's complex and they probably want to get it right, but skipping triple screen support, that might sting the sim racing community more than giants are realizing. Hopefully, they can add both early next year. Another standout company for me was Trek, the sim rig distributors based in the Netherlands, who were sharing space with Bavarian Simtech Racing, who specialize in some cool looking wheels. Trek had a compact booth, but made excellent use of it, showing off a range of aluminium rigs that were solid and also very comfortable. I tested one that I hope soon to buy, the Trek Ace, and that's one of the great things about the expo. If you're patient enough to queue, you can actually try some of the hardware before you commit to what could be an expensive purchase. Over at SimCube, they had a very clever setup to demonstrate their active pedals. Instead of using them in a sim, they mounted them standalone, and an engineer guided you through all the settings in real time. It was fascinating as you could actually feel how much control and adjustability those pedals offer and focus a little more on those features without the distraction of driving a sim. These pedals are seriously impressive, but they do come with a seriously impressive price. It's a shame Moza didn't take a similar approach with their active pedals, which are half the price. I did try Moza active pedals, ironically on a NASCAR setup where not much braking was actually needed, but with no access to the Moza pit house and a view of the settings, it was hard to get a real sense of what the Moza active pedals were really doing, or not, as the case may be. Another missed opportunity from Moza, I think. The stage presentations this year I did enjoy, perhaps more so than previous years, even though they were a bit of a mixed bag with some hits and some misses. SimiCube's spot had a bit of a TED Talk vibe to it, complete with PowerPoint presentation and a Venn diagram presented to a somewhat perplexed audience. Giants, on the other hand, rocked the stage on Friday with a multiplayer demo featuring Ben Collins, aka the Stig, racing Misha around the Nürburgring. Great fun to watch, even if it was a bit chaotic and difficult to tell who was actually winning. As always, stage presentations can offer varied levels of entertainment, but in the main part, I thought that this year they featured more hits than misses. Might have been nice to have seen a combined YouTube panel up on stage, but there was at least Jimmy Broadbent and Steve Brown, two of the million-plus subscriber channels, who had some interesting insights into how they run their channels. A special thank you to Jimmy Broadbent for highlighting how long a 20-minute video actually takes to make, something that most people are probably unaware of. Other things I enjoyed was looking at the new tech all around the hall. It was wonderful to see, and also looking at it and wondering just how it worked and realizing I would probably never get a review sample to look at. The best example of this is probably the podium pedals from Fanatec, which look out of this world, and I can't wait to hear from other YouTubers how they perform on the virtual track. In addition to this, there was, of course, as I've already mentioned, Project Motor Racing, which looks so cool and stole the show, becoming now a serious contender to take the single-player crown from AC, AMS2, and perhaps even Project Cars 2. We will find out for sure on the 25th of November when it's released. And if we get bored with waiting, there is always the surprise announcement of AC Rally, which releases a shade before Project Motor Racing and looks to be a lot of fun. Sadly, again, VR will not be supported at launch for AC Rally, but it is expected to be phased in during early access. We shall see. Certainly, we shall not complain. Finally, the best part of the entire weekend for me personally was meeting fellow sim racing fans and chatting to them at length about all the sim racing stuff that needs to be chatted about at length. And I also enjoyed connecting with fellow creators like Sean from SB Simulators, a great YouTube channel that's growing fast. Go check him out. The link will be below. All in all, despite its rough edges, there was plenty of great stuff to look at and experience at the Sim Racing Expo 2025, and I did enjoy my time there.
We had fun.
Conclusions. So that was my yearly pilgrimage to Dortmund for the Sim Racing Expo, and honestly, I'm already looking forward to 2026, but there are definitely a few things I hope they improve on before then. First off, the entrance. The queue situation this year was not good, to say the least, and I really hope the exhibition hall brings in more staff next year and maybe rethinks where the cloakroom needs to be. It was just totally in the way this year. And then there's the queuing inside the expo itself. It would be great if the organizers of the expo could step in with some overall guidance to the companies operating in their hall. Maybe bring back some roped off areas and more QR code registration like we had in previous years. Those systems worked well. It kept things moving. This year, people were literally sitting in the rigs, typing out their email addresses on a screen that everyone behind could see. Not great. Another thing I'd love to see in 2026 is a lot more rigs for everyone to use. Something like we had in 2024. Now, to be fair, criticisms aside, the expo did appear to be a big success, with probably the biggest crowd draw yet. It's clearly growing in popularity every year and bringing in an impressive range of products. However, there is still this weird obsession with motion rigs, which, considering the cost of even the cheapest motion rig, is difficult to understand. So, if I could just make a few wishes for the 2026 Sim Racing Expo in closing of this video, here's what I'd ask for. I'd like to see Logitech, Moza and Pimax step up their game, maybe host their own booths, or at least share space with a little more presence and energy than they managed this year. Each of them are major players in sim racing, and they need to acknowledge that by at the very least turning up to one of the biggest sim racing expos in Europe. I'd also love to see more accessible rigs for those with mobility issues and more accessibility in general around the show, with perhaps also a smarter queuing system, so people who've traveled long distances actually get to drive something instead of spending the whole day in a queue before displaying their email to everyone behind them. And while we're at it, maybe make the private demo rooms and influencer only rigs a little more inclusive. Perhaps hold a daily draw and let Lady Luck decide who can try out these exclusive setups from anyone at the expo. Let me know in the comments if you attended this year's expo and if you agree with my assessment of the show, or if you disagree. In the meantime, I hope you found this video helpful, and until the next one, race clean, and I'll see you on track. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to click the like button, and if you haven't already done so, subscribe. Click the little bell icon if you want to be notified of any future videos.